Hi folks, and welcome to Tech with Troy. Also welcome tonight to a new feature that we're calling Troy's Weekly Rants. That doesn't really mean that I'm going to do a rant every week, and some of you might not even think this is a rant. It's not. You can think of it more as guidance, but I like the name. It sounded catchy. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is sort of why we started this channel and how sort of these rants, if you will, are going to fit in. To be honest, we started this channel because a lot of tech review shows and places that you go for guidance struck us as sort of by geeks for geeks. And sometimes they talk a little bit over your head, and they go into way too much detail about stuff that a lot of us, might not really care about. And I'll be honest, if anything, I'm probably an uber geek because I teach computer science, I do data science, and I actually can make use of a lot of the very high technological things that they talk about. But I also, I'm a dad and a husband and a teacher, and I've been around long enough to start realizing when you're talking to somebody about tech and they start to get that glazed look in their eye. Obviously, I can't see you through YouTube, but I can tell when somebody is probably going to be put off by a particular approach or giving them too much information. So what we're trying to do here is basically give you straightforward guidance that a normal person can use, and make decisions about what type of particularly laptop to buy right now, and in the future we're going to expand hopefully into other types of technology. Now, when I was writing my script tonight, and what you guys didn't realize that I used a script. I'm this bad with a script, I guess is the best way to say it. But when I was writing my script tonight, I intentionally, tried to avoid coming off as, well, of course you need an i7 because you're going to do your video editing and you're going to be, doing all of this artificial intelligence stuff, So I don't want you to think that I'm talking down to anybody in this video. I don't intend to. What I'm trying to do is basically set the bottom, right? So we're going to talk tonight about a couple of quick rules that you can use when you look for a laptop for yourself, when you look for a laptop for your kids, or for a friend, or whomever. A couple of quick rules that will help you avoid some of the sort of worst of the worst laptops that are out there today. Also realize that my rant tonight isn't really directed at those of you that buy tech that I wouldn't recommend. It's actually more directed at the stores and the online sites that sell you tech that, to be honest, they really shouldn't be selling to you. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, rule number one. First of all, there's a lot of what look like affordable laptops out there with Intel Atom processors in it. Don't buy one of those. An Intel Atom processor is terrible. Now, let me show you some information to help you guide you in sort of why I'm saying that. If you go to CPUbenchmark.net, they do a pretty good job of using this tool called Passmark, or Performance Test V9 is the newest version, to basically come up with lots of different performance criteria on lots of different parts to computers. But they also have a particular chart that is designed to show you how different laptop CPUs compare to each other. And what I did is I went ahead and sort of took that information, pared it down a little bit, because some of the laptops that they talk about, to be quite honest, are old or outdated, and other laptops are just way too powerful for what we do. So let me give you some quick guidelines to sort of set the stage for why I'm telling you to stay the heck away from Intel Atoms. Now, some of you may be aware, some not, but basically when you're talking about an Intel CPU, there's three well-known sort of branding numbers that Intel likes to use. That's the Intel i7, the Intel i5, and the Intel i3. Now, i7 is best, i5 is next best, i3 is the bottom of those three. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only choices for you. A lot of the other videos where I've done my quick picks or I've made recommendations, for instance this last Black Friday season, didn't focus on any of those. They focused on Intel Celerons, and we'll see in just a second, those are a little bit below those. But one thing I wanted to point out is, particularly when you're talking about an i7, i5, or i3, the other thing that matters is right after the dash, like we see here, the 4-digit number, the first digit of that number corresponds to the generation. And the newest generation of Intel Core as they're called, chips, is the 8th generation. As we go down this list, we're going to see that 8th generation tends to knock the socks off of 7th, 6th, 5th, and so forth. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is most of us, to be honest, don't need an i7. We don't need an i5. We may or may not need an i3. And I'm going to sort of set the stage or set the benchmark, if you will, at the Core i3-8130U. Now, for a laptop processor, this is what I consider to be, and some people would argue with me, but the entry-level sort of, if you're going to make content, type of CPU you need. It's a good CPU, and as we can see, it's actually a little bit better than the i5, or close to as good as the last i5 from previous generations. And I call this for producers because if you're doing things like making videos, if you're doing things like creating Adobe PDF documents, if you're constructing spreadsheets, if you're writing documents or ripping music off of CDs and so forth, then you probably need an i3, and if you can afford it, maybe an i5 or an i7. But to be honest, and this is something I've said in several videos before, if you're consuming stuff, so if you're watching video, or if you're reading a PDF, or if you're browsing a web page instead of creating a web page, you don't necessarily need an i3. Would it be nice to have? Sure. But to be honest, most Celeron processors do perfectly well. And what I did here on this table is I took that information from the website I showed you and basically took their CPU benchmark scores and then converted them in terms of what percentage of an i3 8th generation are we talking about here. So, for example, some of the machines that I've recommended before have the Celeron series and the Celeron 4000 or the 4100. And those wind up being just about half as powerful as an i3. But, you know, from my own use and hopefully from your use when you've tried out some of the things I've talked about, they actually do a pretty darn good job of letting you watch video and have some Chrome tabs open and maybe listen. I hope you don't watch videos and listen to music. That would be sort of redundant. But you get the idea. Now, here's the problem. There's lots of different choices out there, and you'll find that AMD has, some chips. The new Ryzen mobile chips, the 5 is around the level of an i5 from Intel, and the Ryzen 3 is a little bit less than the Core i3. The difference there, and I won't get into it, but basically the Ryzen mobile chips come with a better graphics processor, so they're actually better at things like playing some light games, and I've mentioned that in some videos too. But in particular, I'm not going to go through all these different types of processors, but what I wanted to show you is if you keep going down and you go past sort of the Celeron range, you start to get to some processors that I would avoid. Now, I will be honest, there are some AMD processors that I'd probably steer clear of too. Once you get to some of the older AMD A6, A4s, they start to look bad. But in particular, once you get down to around a third as powerful as an i3, you start to see the name Intel Atom popping up a lot. Not only that, but one of the most popular Atom CPUs that I see in machines still being sold today is the Atom X5 Z8350. Now, this thing is only 1/4 as powerful, according to this benchmark, as an i3, which means it's only half as powerful as the Celerons that I have recommended that you get if you are consuming video. Now, to show you what I mean in terms of having vendors out there that are basically trying to get you guys to buy this thing, let's take a look at... Sorry, I don't mean to cycle through so many times. Let's take a look at a couple of the websites that I've been mentioning. First of all, Walmart. Walmart is one of the biggest culprits here. Maybe you could make an argument that you should use an Intel Atom processor in a tablet. I don't think so, particularly if the tablet's going to run Windows, by the way. This one's running Android, so I'll give them that. But here you've got a tablet that's running Windows 10 Home. Here you've got a 2-in-1 convertible that's running Windows. There's a lot of machines here with different levels of Atom processors. They're just not powerful enough. And Walmart's not the only culprit. You go to Amazon and you look at some of their seemingly nicely priced machines, and again, an Intel Atom N2600, I think that's even older than the Atom we were just referring to. Here, the X5 Z8350. There it is. It's $179. Don't get these machines. A Celeron, sometimes a Celeron will struggle if you try to do too much intensive stuff. But to be honest, for most of us, most of the time it's great, and at the price, you can't beat it. But in Atom, I don't want a machine that's half as powerful as a Celeron processor. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, the other thing, and you might have noticed as we went through and we're talking about or looking at some of the examples of the Atom processors, is that there's a second rule. Do not buy a Windows 10 laptop with only 2 gigabytes of memory. To show you why, I made up a quick little back of the envelope calculation, if you will, in terms of how much memory usage the typical machine would see. Now, first of all, and these numbers are sort of loose because, to be honest, if you've got more RAM, Windows will actually use more RAM because it tries to preload some things and make things a little bit faster for you. But at the very minimal amount, Windows 10 is going to take up 1 gigabyte of storage. Also, rough rule of thumb is if you're using Chrome or another browser, each tab you have open is going to take about 1/10 of a gig or 100 megs. And so 10 tabs in a Chrome browser, like I'm doing when I show you guys this demo, that's another gig. And then if you've got Microsoft Word open, I've got it open right now with my show notes on it, and it's running around 900 meg, almost a gig. So right there, if you have Windows running with the Chrome browser with some tabs open and Word open, you're well over 2 gig. Now, one of the quick picks and one of the recommendations that I made for the Black Friday 2018 period was a machine that only had 3 gig, and I was very surprised at how well it ran. I will be honest, if I try to open up too much stuff, it does start to slow down. But I guess that extra gig above 2 gigabytes makes it acceptable. I would still rather have 4 gig, but like I said, when I recommended the machine, it was selling for about $109 at the time. You couldn't beat that. But by and large, I would try to get at least 4 gigabytes of memory. I certainly wouldn't make do with only 2 gigabytes. And if you look back at some of those machines that we were just talking about, you'll notice that if they come with an Atom processor, they almost invariably come with 2 gigabytes of RAM. So you're going to be disappointed for 2 reasons there. The processor is going to stink, and even if it didn't stink, then you're not going to be able to load too much before Windows starts to slow way down. And when Windows starts to slow way down, what it tries to do is it tries to use virtual memory, which is it basically takes a portion of your hard drive, your SSD or whatever, and tries to swap stuff in and out there to allow it to run more things. That doesn't work. You don't want that. That's just going to be really, really ugly. So I hope that this has been somewhat informative to you, and I hope that you'll just follow those 2 rules. Don't buy Atom processors, and don't buy any Windows machine that only has 2 gigabytes of RAM. I hope this helped. Like I said, I know this is sort of the light side of a rant, but if you've appreciated it, please feel free to go ahead and leave a comment. Tell us what other rants you'd like to hear or what other topics you'd like us to talk about. And if you did like this video, we'd appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and take care. Bye-bye.